Hello everyone, I have just finished part 2 of Plagueis. I've just read chapter 21. So let's get into it now. Again, I think this is a bit of an epilogue to the part, honestly. Plagueis has Palpatine brought, we open up with of the Jedi and the police discovering what had gone down in Plagueis and Palpatine's wake of taking out the Maladians. It's not Maladians, Maladians. I realised there was an I in there that I hadn't noticed. But Maladians, they noticed that they had took note of what they had found the carnage of Palpatine and Plagueis' attack on the what was it? I can't remember what it was, but on them and corporate or something like that, and the Maladians. So and they aren't really able to figure anything out with them yet, but they are investigating into it, and we get to see how they thought there could have been an explosive that went off because of how messy the Maladians were in how messy their corpses were. But anyway, Plagueis, now realising that Palpatine has learnt the lessons he taught him at the beginning of the part, has brought him off to Abora, his island, if you remember, where he conducts all his tests and stuff, and he has him brought there, and Palpatine sees all of his subjects, and 114D completely makes Palpatine confused, because all these subjects are they're wildlife for the most part. They consist of different animals and species, and something that got a laugh from me was 114D telling Palpatine that Palpatine, not realising that it's not going to make sense to him, saying these are the Magister's pregnancies, and of course it's but they were created through Plagueis' control of midichlorian manipulation. But anyway, Palpatine sees Venomous, and Plagueis brings Palpatine off to one side after introducing him to what Venomous was, and how he was a test to see who would be the one to see who would be stronger. And he starts, and I'm going to read off my summary for these, I think, for the most part, but he talks about how, before I get into what Plagueis was talking about, Plagueis' conversation with Palpatine, he takes note that Palpatine and wonders had Plagueis been weakened by the Maladian attack, and it was no less weak, and he wasn't any weaker. So, and even Plagueis says, "Do you think Malak was weakened by being struck by Revan's lightsaber? Do you think Bane was weakened by the armour he wore? Do you think that Darth Gravid's apprentice was weakened by the prosthetics she had to wear after the battle?" So just tells him no, and anyway, again, he introduces him to Venus, and he brings him off into a chamber. And that appears to be where he resides when resides on the border when he's not conducting his experiments. And he makes it clear, and he starts to talk about how about his experiments. Hold on, I need to get the book back up. Give me a moment. Hold on. when Sidious asks what this place was, Plagueis tells him that it's a vessel that contains all the things that he is devoted to, and that he loves but without compassion. He has attachment to all these creatures without compassion, because he wants to experiment on them. They are creatures of interest to Plagueis that are abnormal. They aren't normal creatures, and he wants to see whether he can manipulate them, like how he got an example of with the Inchori, whatever you want to call him. When Palpatine asks, what does 114D mean about the Magister's pregnancies, Plagueis goes on to explain that he did it through the Force, through midichlorian manipulation. But he mentions that... Hang on. Need to get the summary back up. But he mentions that he tried to force the midichlorians to be willing to be... He tried to force the midichlorians into complying with him, and that's something that the Force... And he was trying to whip the command over life and death from the Force, and that's something the Force is resistant to. As I put in my summary, the Force is resistant to those who don't accept authority and try to force their way, and so the Force will try to harm them as a result. The Jedi are experiencing the Force's resistance because of the light ruling for too long, and they are forcing their own way. As a result of the Force not complying with them, they are gradually losing their power, and unexpected consequences that are causing unexpected consequences that are more aligned with the dark side. And unexpected consequences that are more aligned with the dark side are caused through their influence, giving the Sith more power and control. The Sith must be aware of when the Jedi and the light side make mistakes so they can take advantage. That's what I gathered from Plagueis' conversation, that the Force is not... If you're trying to force your commands on the Force, it's going to resist you, and it will try to harm you as a result for trying to overtake it. But when you accept when you accept that you are authoritative over the Force, when you see yourself as authoritative over the Force rather than trying to get the Force to move in your way, that's when the Force becomes willing, subservient. As I put here, Plagueis notes he failed to take care when impregnating the creatures through midichlorian manipulation, as he attempted to take control of life and death from the Force and tip the balance. The Force resisted him in reaction to what he was doing, despite how forceful he had been, saying the Force tested him in ways Tenebrous sought to. He explains midichlorians aren't easily persuaded by someone new to the ability. He says the Force needs to be won over by a Sith being capable of accepting authority, and be won over in a way that forces it to be inclined to the dark side. Otherwise, the Force will resist and try to harm or eliminate the one trying to control it. He mentions the Jedi have fallen into moral collapse in favour of its own beliefs and means, and is taking the Republic with it, because the Jedi have lost the allegiance of the Force. They can still draw upon the Force, but their ability to use it is weakened. Each of their actions usually causes an opposite or unrecognised effect or consequence. Each of their actions usually causes an opposite or unrecognised effect or consequences that favour the dark side and allow the Sith to increase their power. However, that power they are given requires care, and they need to be aware of moments where the light side fails and creates openings. So then, and only then, they can act without fear of facing resistance or repercussion. So, after that, Plagueis goes on to the plans for the future. Well, as we know, Plagueis, it's been made clear in the book that Plagueis doesn't like look into the future. He's more focused on present matters. But I think he does still need to but he does still occasionally look into the future and how to control things when necessary. As he made it clear in training Palpatine in Chapter 12, he says to stop thinking of the future and keep his mind in the present. So anyway, for Plagueis' plans, and it's a lot simpler in my summary of what's going on. Plagueis will dedicate himself to mastering midichlorian manipulation and the Force, and to furthering the Sith Grand Plan and healing from the Maladian wounds. He will teach San Hill so that he may become chairman of the banking clan, so that he may carefully use him to finance a new economy and weapons for a new government that in due time he will use to wage war against the Republic. Before that, though, he needs to let the Outer Rim suffer. Forgot about that thing. And the core prosper, so that dissatisfaction with the Republic reaches a high and a cool, so that dissatisfaction with the Republic rises. That's what I should put in, and a call for war, and a war begins. I should put that in, and war. And whether this is successful, and whether their success is, and whether they are successful or not, will be revealed through science. And then finally, Palpatine tells Plagueis that the Jedi are investigating into the Maladian and the Grand Corporate murders, and that they could in time figure out that the Sith have returned, or that Plagueis is aligned with the dark side, and that Ego Damascus could secretly be plotting against them. And so he offers to train. He offers to train an assassin that can serve their needs and take out important figures, which is of course going to be Maul, as we know. Someone who isn't a full-fledged Sith and can stand against and can reach the powers of a Sith, but someone that can execute what the Sith require in a fashion better than, let's say, the Maladians, where they're stronger, where Maul can be stronger. And Plagueis considers it and accepts it. However, he makes a point that Sidious will only train him in the Force, while a friend of Plagueis's, who is a martial, who is a Feline combat specialist called Drezza, will see to Maul's martial training and make sure he is fierce but loyal to the Sith. And Plagueis says that that Palpatine is not to send Maul out against against important people, important enemies, without him judging Maul's skill first. And Plagueis mentions that the Force provides in the same way nature provides, and that the Force has given them someone strong in the dark side to carry out the Sith needs, because the light side has ruled for too long. So yeah, that's really all there is of note in the chapter. And again, we get to see Plagueis' understanding of the Force, how he notes its resistance to those who try to control it, rather than trying to be accepting that, rather than trying to say, it's difficult to really explain, but you know, it's resistant to someone who's trying to force their authority rather than accepting they are authoritative. And I think that's probably the best way to put it, and even to me it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But if someone's trying to force their authority on the Force, it doesn't like that and punishes them for trying to be, and for trying to take control of it. And the Jedi have lost, and the Jedi have lost that authority, and in turn lost the allegiance of the Force by not serving, I guess, in the ideals, by not serving in the ideals of the Force, and instead serving their own needs and ends. Again, it's a very complicated matter, unfortunately. Plagueis' teachings of the Force is quite complicated when it comes to midichlorian manipulation. But from what I'm gathering, the Jedi, they became, I guess they became too arrogant in their abilities in Plagueis' eyes, and the Force saw them as, rather than being authoritative, they were forcing their authority onto people rather than actually being authoritative, rather than actually being authoritative. You know what I mean, what I was saying. Resistant to people trying to force their authority, rather than someone trying to be the authority, if that makes sense. And so of course the Force acts in retribution to the Jedi, and opens up the window for the dark side to come in and take control, and to have the dark side become the leaders. So yeah, anyway, thank you all for watching. Goodbye, and I really enjoyed the chapter again. I'm just a bit sad that we've gone back to those complex and cryptic chapters that are really difficult to understand.